Greetings. Welcome, everybody. Good afternoon, and welcome to Building the Black Educator Pipeline. I am your host, educator activist, Shayna Terrell. Welcome back for another exciting week of great conversation and just intriguing people. I learn a lot each week coming back with our new guest. I want to thank everybody for coming back week after week and supporting us with this show. And anybody new out there joining us this week, we appreciate the love and the support. We need more people to be joining this co-conspiracy that we are forming here. As always, shout out to Center for Black Educator Development. Shout out to Citizens Ed for creating this exciting platform where we get to talk to real people in the real struggle, doing real things. So I want to get into today's show theme. So voices of the future, the next generation of educator activists. So, I am so into young people and hearing what they have to say because they are our future. So I'm super excited for today's conversation and for our guests. So I'm going to start off by introducing Caleb Newton. Caleb is a 17-year-old high school student pursuing an international baccalaureate diploma at an independent school outside of Baltimore. His interests at school include choir and baseball. He is in his school's concert choir and a member of the baseball team. He became interested in the Center for Black Educator Development because he has always wanted to help change how Black students are taught and represented at school. This program for him embodies what he wants to pursue in his professional career. So shout out to Caleb and welcome him to the show. We also want to welcome Nia Goodall. She is a third-year elementary education major and political science minor at Howard University. She is from Houston, Texas. She is a curriculum and instruction honors student, vice president of the School of Education, a member of the Oversight and Reform Committee for Howard University Senate, and a writer for the Liberate Political Review. She is passionate about reforming the system of education and surrounding policies to make education more equitable for Black and Brown students. She hopes to do this by pursuing a graduate degree in education policy after receiving her undergraduate degree and engaging in social justice in her day-to-day life. In her free time, she likes to do photography, read, skate, and hang out with her friends and siblings. As a servant leader apprentice, she has gotten a taste of different methods that can be used to provide equitable education for Black students and hopes to have the same positive impacts later in her career. So ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the show, Caleb and Nia. Hey, y'all.
Hey.
How are you doing?
Yes. So first and foremost, I want to thank both of you guys for taking your time out to be with us today. So just a little explanation for our audience here. Both Caleb and Nia are currently working in Freedom School's Literacy Academy, our virtual academy. So Caleb holds the title of Junior Servant Leader, which just means he's a high school student leading in the classroom, a virtual classroom. And Nia holds the title of Servant Leader Apprentice, which means she's a college student serving and leading in the classroom. But both of them are part of our virtual Freedom School's Literacy Academy program. So I'll welcome them taking time out of work today to be with us. Thanks, guys.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Yes. So as always, with my guests, y'all, I start off by asking folks to please share their journey. So what inspired them to want to become an educator? What got you onto this path? So Caleb, we would love to start with you. If you can share with us, what inspired you to get into education?
So I was actually born in Philadelphia, and my mom has taught for almost 25 years. So I've always been rather in tune with the education system, and especially the inequality and injustices against Black and Brown students. My mom has taught at all types of schools. She's taught at private schools and public charters, and now she teaches at the Seed School here in Baltimore, Maryland, where it's a predominantly Black school, and she can see the injustices that happens every day. So a lot of my motivation to get into this type of work comes from her and comes from seeing how she's helped other Black students and realizing that that's also what I want to do to give my life fulfillment as well.
Caleb, that's amazing. And I think that folks need to hear from his story. His inspiration was his mom. But right, we can show people better than we can tell them. And her example in the world of education was an inspiration to Caleb. So shout out to your mom. I hope she's out here watching.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Good stuff, mom. Nia, we're on you. We would love to hear, how did you get inspired to get on the road to education?
Okay, my inspiration for getting into education came from my own experiences in school. Growing up in Texas, there was not a lot of diversity in any of my schools, um, in the teachers or in the students. So I was inspired by my third grade teacher to become a teacher because she was the first Black teacher I ever had. And that was the year where I was transitioning from private school to public school. And she really helped kind of ground me at that school because I was really lost. I didn't have many friends going into it. And she was just my biggest cheerleader. And just having that Black role model for me in that transition period was just really influential to me even today. I'm still like in contact with her even now. And she, while I was in school, she motivated me to want to join the honors program, to want to join different clubs, to try out for the spelling bee. So I was just really inspired by how she connected with me as one of the only Black students in the class and just continued to motivate me. And I wanted to be that for other Black students.
Nia, that's so dope. Can you say her name? You remember her name?
Yes, her name is Miss Madison Scott.
Shout out to Miss Madison Scott out there changing lives and inspiring young Black people. Yes, Miss Scott. So a while ago we had on this show Think a Black Teacher. So just from what Nia said that inspired her. If you remember the Black teacher who got you into education or you had a positive relationship with that teacher to inspire you to be in education, please hashtag that person's name and hashtag Think a Black Teacher. Shout out to Miss Scott. So many times on this show we talk about the inspiration and what that means and how you as an educator can really change the lives and the trajectory of young people. You're hearing it live right now from Caleb and Nia, young people who entered the struggle just recently, that someone in their lives tapped them and told them what they can be and showed them the way. So as an educator, you're such an inspiration to so many people. So please, again, remember how important that is. In order for us to build the next generation of young educators, right? We got to be an inspiration to them. So shout out to Nia and Caleb for letting someone believe in them and also believing in themselves. Dope, dope, dope. So I heard both of you. Well, Caleb, you talked a lot about your mom, but Nia, you talked about your experience in school. And I think that that's such an important lens on helping folks develop a relationship with education and develop a relationship with school. I would love for you guys to expound on both of you talking about how many Black teachers did you actually encounter in school and what has your experience been so far with school? Yeah, I'll let you take that first since you expounded on it a little bit already.
Yes, throughout my school, I only had two Black teachers. I had the one that I mentioned in third grade, and then I had another one later on in my school career. I had one in ninth grade, very briefly for my chemistry class. Um, and my experience with school is I always really loved school. I love learning. Like even now, I get so excited about learning new things and learning new experiences. So I always had a good mindset going into school. I really always just wanted to learn new things, work on projects, hang out with my friends. But I will say sometimes the school climate at my schools prevented me from wanting to go to school. Even though I loved learning so much, sometimes like the microaggressions from my teachers from my white teachers who I had, or from white peers, or just like the blatant racism that I experienced made me a student who loved school not want to go to school sometimes.
Yes, and I want to point something out because when you use the word the climate, right? People always think of climate like school culture or meaning like the kids in there was wild. I want to point out that Nia's distinction in what she connected was how she was treated by teachers. Um, so it's really important to include teachers and how they treat children as a part of how we evaluate and look at school climate. That's why I'm going to give an even bigger shout out to Miss Scott out here who made you feel safe. And why the importance or the existence of Black teachers are so important for somebody like Nia, who existed in a predominantly white space and felt unsafe a lot of the times. So, Nia, thank you for sharing that. Caleb, I would love to hear from you about how many Black teachers did you actually experience in your education life? And then what has been your experience with school?
All right. So within my academic career, I've had three Black teachers. I've had one for each sector of school. So one in elementary, one in middle school, and one in high school. I had Miss Linda in elementary school. I believe that was first grade. I had Mr. Brown, who was the music teacher in middle school at the public school I attended. And then I had Mr. Dixon, who was a physics teacher in ninth grade. So I've had three, and my relationship with school, I've always had a sense of pride in school and my academic achievements. So I tend to work harder in school. But a lot of times the teachers, like Nia referenced earlier, the teachers, their actions provide a lot of stress, and it's harder to achieve, especially being in a predominantly white school now. I feel like a lot of people don't understand what I'm going through, or how what they're saying how it affects me in a way. I feel like they're kind of numb to how they are really affecting the students. So it's definitely been a mostly positive experience in school, but definitely those things hindered my ability to do as best as I could.
So I'm listening to both of you talk and share your experiences. I get so excited to hear both of you talk about the excitement about learning, the investment in learning, and taking pride in education. What makes me super sad, but then keeps me super hopeful is your experience with teachers who have made you felt less than or unsafe in school. I'm hopeful though, because the reason why we started the Center for Black Education, Educator Development, the reason why we have programs like for you, Caleb and Nia, is so that we can get more Black educators in the field. So that imagine how much more exciting your experience would have been if you had people every step of the way to love on you and to encourage you in those fields. I would love if either one of you could share some of the negative experience you've experienced in school and share how those things have made you feel. Nia, I know you talked about microaggressions, and Caleb, you talked about the stress that teachers have put on you. Can either of you point to like a specific experience and talking about how that's made you feel?
I oh
Yep. Perfect.
Okay. I can talk about an experience. When I was in eighth grade, there was a teacher, and I had actually had him for 2 years. And we did like Texas history in seventh grade, and we did US history in eighth grade. And of course, US history, we go over slavery. In Texas, it's very, very brief, and it's painted as an economic proposition instead of what it really was. And I remember one of our warm-up questions was like, why did the United States need slaves or something? And whenever he was answering the question, he was like, well, it was just better for us economically. And then he said something along the lines of, and they're still like that now, or like, and we still wish we had that now, something along those lines. And I remember I was the only Black kid in my class. And I remember just sitting there like freaking out in my seat, and I didn't know what to say because I'm the only Black kid in my class. I'm like looking around, and my peers are just like going along, writing down the warm up. And I remember I went home and I told that like in tears to my parents, and they immediately like contacted the administration, and they like my principal like apologized to me profusely. The teacher was like had to apologize to me, to the class. was being monitored for the rest of the year for what he was saying. But that experience just taught me like how important it is for me to call out those experiences, because if I hadn't said anything, he would have continued to think that that was something completely okay to say to a classroom of very impressionable eighth graders. Um, and so I think that that's just something really big in the classroom, is that even though it's not us as a student's responsibility to be calling out our teachers, I do think that it's something that unfortunately we have to do, because we can't let teachers continue, or not very good teachers continue to believe that what they're saying is okay.
Definitely. And shout out to you for your bravery. And what grade was that?
It was in eighth grade.
Shout out to you for your bravery in middle school, to feel brave enough and safe enough in your home to speak up. And shout out to your parents for going and calling that teacher out. A lot of times folks don't have the courage or the resources to do so. So that was big. But you bring up a very important point, and it's the power that teachers have in the classroom. Because imagine if you weren't that one little black girl in that classroom, how that lesson would have continued, how his indoctrination of what he thinks about slavery are sprinkled in the minds of all those little children that he's teaching. But the sad part is that teacher taught you what he thought of you, and your folks and your culture, which was completely ignorant. But shout out to you at a young age for that courage. Love that.
Thank you.
Yes. Caleb, does any story come to mind for you?
Absolutely. In middle school, just like Nia, I had a tech class where we were learning, how to navigate computers and stuff like that. And the teacher, who was a white woman, she just refused to call on me for I believe it was almost a week. So I was raising my hand when she did finally call on me, after no one else in the class, had the answer. She was impressed with what I was saying, but it took her so long to even like accept my input or accept my feedback to what was being said or taught. And I just remember telling my mom about that, and she had worked at the school at the time. So she had talked to, her boss, and the teacher was checked. But it was something that I'll always carry with me. I have another experience. I'm not sure if you want me to paint that too.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna go again. I believe this was also in middle school. And I had misspelled the word people. I remember I spelled it P-E-P-O-L-E instead of, as people instead of people. And the white substitute teacher, in front of the entire class, stood up and pointed at me and started laughing. So I remember that I actually wrote a paper about that in high school. And just like, that's what I'm talking about when I say like, some teachers, their actions have an effect on students that they don't understand. And how you were talking about the power dynamic in the classroom, teachers need to realize the power they have over students. And they need to realize how what they say and how they conduct themselves is a role model for other people in the classroom. So when, she calls me out for a simple mistake, the other white kids in the classroom will learn to do that same thing. So those were definitely two experiences in middle school that I'll always keep with me for sure.
Both of your statements and sharing is so powerful, because we see again years later for both of you, it's still like it was yesterday, right? You remember this so graphically, so vividly, because it affects your psyche.
Okay, so sisters.
Are we back?
I can hear you. I can see you now.
Did I leave or did everybody leave?
We were just having some technical difficulties, I think.
All right, bam. I got so scared. I was like, oh my God, it's my internet. Dang it. All right. We are back, people. Back with 11. Good. All right. So what I was saying was, again, the stories you both shared, how like passionate, number one, in telling the stories, but the effect that it has on you and your psyche. And again, I don't know if teachers always understand the trajectory, the things, the little things they say, the little things they do, the power that that has in a young child's life and shaping their images of themselves, shaping the images of their relationship with school. Or again, Caleb, we're gonna shout your mom out. Nia, we're gonna shout your parents out, because maybe if you guys didn't have the reinforcements at home, your confidence will be broken right now, based on a single relationship with a teacher, and the things that that did to you. So I apologize that you all had to go through that, but I thank both of you for speaking up. And again, I thank your parents for being strong enough and raising young people who know how to advocate for themselves. So shout out to both of you. But I hope this is a lesson to all of our folks viewing and watching straight from the voices of our young people. The damage that can be done if we don't love up on our young people and encourage them rightfully. And how racism rears its ugly head in the classroom. Both of them being singular black students in predominantly white schools, the experience that they had to experience from their white teachers. Both of you in your bios reference a lot about equity in schools or changing the way black students are taught or represented. Let's dive a little bit deeper into that. I would love to hear about some of the disparities that you all think exist right now within education.
Well, I can definitely speak on that. One of the reasons why I want to become a Black educator is to be a role model for children. Like I said before, role models have a very big impact on how students learn and how they're taught. So, being a role model for Black students when they may be the minority or they may not be represented in school is very important to me. I always hear about stories about how one teacher or one person in a person's life, affected them for so long. And I really want to be like that person for other people because I feel like that can help them get out of a rough patch or anywhere or any struggle that they need to get through. I feel like a strong role model can definitely do that for them. So.
Thanks. Appreciate that, Caleb. And I appreciate that you are being the change that you want to see in the classroom. So you're not just talking it, you like, I'm going to be about it. I'm going to be that role model. Nia, we'd love to hear from you. What disparities do you think exist in education right now?
I agree with Caleb. I think one of the biggest issues is just the lack of representation in the classroom. Because as a Black student, if you don't see other Black teachers, if you don't see like any Black teachers in your school, you're not going to associate education with being Black. You're not going to think that that's something that Black people can do. And I think that goes for all careers. Like if you don't see a Black scientist, if you don't see Black mathematicians, Black presidents, if you don't see Black people in these roles, if you're not taught about Black people who have been in these roles, you're not going to think that that's a career path for you. So I think incorporating representation into our teaching is just really, really instrumental to making sure that Black students know that all careers are open to them and that they can pursue these careers, and that way they're not the only ones in this space.
Facts. Representation is big. And that is a large reason why the Center for Black Educator Development was started, to recruit, train, and hire more teachers of color so that our young people would get to experience Black teachers. I know both of you have had the experience of having a Black teacher, which you are blessed. There are children who go through their K through 12 experience without having one Black teacher. I always quote the numbers here in Pennsylvania. There are 450 schools right now in PA who don't employ a single teacher of color. So not only are Black teachers important for Black students, they're important for all students. And the reason why that's important to the point that Nia made earlier with her teacher teaching the way he taught about slavery. Those white children would need a counter narrative to that. They would need somebody to tell them the truth about slavery and what it really is and how it affected a group of people culturally.
Absolutely. I'd like to speak on that. So,
Yep.
definitely within Black history, I feel like it's almost just as important to teach white students about Black history to stop the ignorance that's happening in this country. A lot of times, it'll take Black leadership in schools and a bunch of Black teachers and teacher unions and even the school board to make that change so that white students can get that education on Black history. But it needs to come from white administrators and white people and white authorities, because we're not going to change anything if only Black people know about their history, because white people need to understand, what they're learning and how to interact or how to move around Black people as well.
Caleb, you
I
may go ahead, Nia. Yep.
I was just going to say that I really agree with that. I think a really big part of these teachers not teaching Black history is just ignorance. Like they don't get the training for that. They don't even know anything about Black history from their own education experiences. I remember when I was a junior in high school, my teacher, we had honestly never learned about Reconstruction in any of my history classes until I was a junior in high school. And my teacher, he was a teacher who was actively anti-racist. He was a white man, but he was an actively anti-racist educator. And he made a point to incorporate Reconstruction, incorporate talking about Black Wall Street, incorporate talking about just all his Black history in his teaching, and as well as like Asian history, Hispanic history, incorporating just a lot of different things. And I remember some of my white peers, they were so shocked, like they had never even heard of this before. And in actuality, it wasn't their fault. It was because all of the educators that they had had before that had been so ignorant. They just truly didn't know about anything. So I agree with Caleb that incorporating Black history into our education isn't just beneficial for Black students, it's beneficial for all students to know like what's the truth about American history.
Nia, you hit that dead on, the truth about American history. So what your teacher was teaching and what Caleb is asking for is for folks to tell the truth and teach the truth, and stop speaking only to teach one side of history. And that cycle has to be broken. That what is taught in schools right now from a historical perspective is the truth and the singular story of American history. That cycle has to be broken. And Caleb, you are exactly right that it is going to take more than just Black people saying, hey, here's what happened with my culture. Here's what happened with my people. It's going to take everybody. It's going to take white people not accepting that their culture or the history that's told about them is a dominant history. And the way your teacher told history, Nia, in an inclusive perspective, that while this was happening in America, this is what was happening to everyone in America. And we're not focused on the singular, what people consider to be this heroic story of the white rise to power. So shout out again to your teacher for being inclusive on that. And Caleb, continue to call out folks to use their power and their positions of power to teach the truth inside of schools. You guys are both in school right now. Nia, you're at a HBCU. Caleb, you're at a high school. But both of you have had prior experiences with being in predominantly like white schools and being in private schools as well. I would love to hear about some of the differences that you saw in your school's experiences and what things could be done to change those things, especially disparities between private and public schools.
I think I think a big issue is lack of funding. So how taxes are used to are allocated to go to the communities that they serve. If a community is not as affluent as another one, the schools are not going to be as quality, and students are not going to get the education they need. While a private school will have funding from multiple streams of funding, and they'll have the resources for different programs and better teachers and all this other stuff. So I think a big disparity between public and private schools is the tax allocation. I did a research project in my psychology class this past year about that with one of the only other Black students in my class named Xavier. And we talked about during our presentation how reallocating funds so that everyone can get the education that they need is key for limiting the gap or not leaving some kids just out, in the world to fend for themselves while others get the opportunities that weren't provided for the other kids, for the less fortunate.
Right. Do you mind if I challenge you for a moment?
Yeah, go ahead.
What if I'm in that affluent community and I say to you, I work hard for my money and I'm taxed at a higher rate. I don't want my money shifted around and given to people who don't work as hard as me. What would your response to that be?
Okay, so first, it wouldn't even be a lot of their money, especially in metropolitan cities. Black students are given like $10,000 each or something like that from the education, from the board and stuff like that. But it's not used in a way that helps the Black students. I know in Washington, D.C., in the city, Black students, $10,000 was for each student, and that was like the authorities and the legal perspectives gave them that money. So it's just not used for the students. So it's not just the taxes, but so, for affluent people who think that we're trying to steal money or do this and that, it's just not that at all. We're trying to reallocate the funds already given to the students so that they actually go to the students and not going to authorities that just want to use school as a business instead of a nonprofit organization that should actually be helping students.
I think that you answered that perfectly. And I think that puts a shape and a light on for folks to understand it's not necessarily about you. It's about equity and what's right and how we can best support students financially. And when people, I think what you're educated on, which a lot of folks are not, is how money is allocated and how money is used to support and educate students. So dope perspective on that. Nia, I would love to hear for you about the disparities that you think exist between school districts and some things that can change about that.
Yeah, I think one of the main differences that I experienced going from private to a public school was just the lack of diversity that I saw. I think in my entire K through 12 private school, there were probably between 20 and 30 Black students, like maximum. Like 30 honestly seems like a lot. And even though the public school that I attended was predominantly white, it was still it still had pockets of diversity, I would say. So my private school, there were very few Black students. There were even less Asian students, maybe 10 Asian students, and even less Hispanic students. So going to that school, I was not only not exposed to other Black students, I just wasn't exposed to any students of color. And so going to a public school allowed me to, even though I wasn't getting a ton of exposure to other Black students, I still had some. And I still had exposure to a lot of like other Asian students, Hispanic students. And I think that is just one of the biggest differences that I experienced, was just the lack of diversity, but also the lack of willingness to recognize racism. Because even though my public school didn't do a great job of recognizing racism, if it was called out, it was handled. At my private school, I remember in first grade, we were singing a song about different cultures in the world, and our music teacher told us when we got to the part about China, they told us to pull our eyes back and act like, because he was like, look, they have like different eyes. They were like, make your eyes and act like you look Chinese. And I remember there was one other Asian student, and I remember feeling like it was so wrong. I didn't want to do it. I went home and told my parents, and they contacted the administration, and they just like briefly scolded him, but he still didn't see the issue in it, and he still didn't want to change. And I remember that as a first grader happening. So just seeing how the lack of diversity just led them to not even think that that was wrong in comparison to my public school. And even though I still faced racism and microaggressions, they still saw it as a wrong thing that was happening, while my private school just thought that it was normal.
Yes, see, that's a very interesting point when you bring up diversity, because I think that a lot of times we exist in the world, we exist in our own bubbles. But people don't understand how when you create homogeneous societies, what that then reinforces for people. Because if you weren't in that class to even say something at all, that administration again wouldn't have raised it as a point, because within that homogeneous society that students are all white, all affluent, that type of behavior is acceptable and it goes unchecked. But then those children then become adults who then display the same behavior, they feel like which they feel like is acceptable and goes unchecked, until they get into a world where they have to interact with Asian and Black folks, and then they don't understand, like, well, why are you guys so mad? Why are you so angry? I didn't see that as offensive, but you grew up in this very homogeneous society all this time, and those behaviors and those thoughts and those ideas go unchecked and go unchallenged. So you bring up a very important point, what schools also create and reinforce, right? Small little microcosms of the world is what's happening inside these bubbles. Let's switch gears for a second. Let's talk about you guys' experience this summer. This is both of your first times with us at the center and both of your first times experiencing Freedom Schools. I would love to hear from both of you. How has your Freedom Schools experience been?
My experience has been really amazing. Just seeing the students and how they're so excited to learn has been phenomenal. I I one of the students that I have, we do phonics every day to just increase their literacy levels. And one of the students, we were doing a spelling portion, and she had spelled the word correctly, and she got so excited about it. And she told me that last year she had misspelled the word, and she was really, really struggling with that word and with the other compound words we had been learning, and it had been really hard for her. So she had told me the whole year in between, she had focused on really trying to learn her compound words, and especially that one word. And so she was just elated to have spelled it correctly. And just seeing how excited she got about learning and how much she wanted to keep trying to learn, just really reminded me of why I do it, of why I like do all the lesson planning and teach, because just seeing how excited she got as a Black student about learning, about like wanting to be in school, and how we can create that safe space for her to want to learn and to grow. It just really affirmed why I chose to work with the center this summer.
Amazing. Caleb, how has your experience been with Freedom Schools?
My experience has been truly enlightening, honestly. Learning about the Black history, especially, my nation. We are part of the Caddo Nation, Octavius Caddo, who is an activist in Philadelphia. So learning about Black history, like I said, I've talked about this to my friends and people around me. I've learned more Black history. I learned more Black history during the training week at this program than I did my 11 years of schooling. So it's been truly enlightening. And now that we're reading to our younger students, our younger scholars, that's been really cool as well. I read actually this morning a book called Trombone Shorty, and it's reminded me, or really instead affirmed, why I want to do this and why I want to get into education, to empower others and enlighten others about Black history and teach them about it.
That's dope. That both of you are having these experiences. And what I would love to point out, especially, of course, the show is called Building the Black Educator Pipeline. I think one of the many things that helps this is not only recruiting students like you into the pipeline, but giving you guys the opportunity to have the experiences or have the apprenticeships to work with younger students, so that a number of things, you feel the connection and you feel the importance of you like being a role model and having an impact on that student's life. But that intergenerational connection that's being formed in a program like this, that one day that scholar could say this summer experience that they had with you, Caleb, that they had with you, Nia, would then inspire them to become a servant leader intern, right? Like, ooh, I love Mr. Caleb. Like, he looks kind of young, right? Because, you know, they think of us older folks, older teachers, right? Like, we're out of touch. But to have young folks in front of them, like, Caleb, he's in high school, he likes to read. Like, Mom, I want to be like Caleb. Same touch with Nia. And for our high school students to see our college students like in leading and teaching, like, oh, they in college, they only a couple of years older than me, like, and they still kind of cool. Like, this is the cool thing to do. So I love the fact that like Freedom Schools creates those kind of interactions and those kind of experiences for you guys. I would love to hear your perspectives on why do you think a program like this is so important for young people who want to pursue a career in education?
I think it kind of ties back to what I said before about representation, just seeing a Black teacher for like 5 weeks throughout a program, that can be so affirming because we do create the safe space for them to learn, to make mistakes, and to not be criticized, to just have this place where they can build up on their prior knowledge also, but to have it through a Black lens. Like in my class, every day we do a quote from a Black leader, whether it be like an athlete, an activist, president. Like we do a quote every single day by a Black leader, and I tell them why it's so important. And I think that that is just a really big part of why it's so important, because they might not be getting that in school. They might not be getting that Black history perspective in their education. So I think having this throughout the summer kind of gives them that.
So, but for a college student like you, why is this so important for you? I think that you're dead on with why this is important for our young babies, and you guys being culturally responsive in your teaching and learning is going to do have a world of an impact on our babies. But with somebody like you, who's a college student looking to be in education, why has this program been important for you?
I think it's been important for me because it's just shown me that like reform in education can happen to make it equitable. Like seeing the work that the center does, like that's what I want to do in my career. I want to create equity in education, and seeing that programs exist and programs are actually helping to further the movement, it's just really affirming that, okay, like this is already happening and I can be a part of it. So I would say that's the biggest part for me.
Caleb, I would love to hear your perspective on this. Why is it important that programs like this, like Freedom Schools, exist?
Well, personally, for me, I really didn't know what I wanted to do, for a career for a while. And I think programs like this provide a lot of guidance for kids like me. So I was kind of bouncing around. I didn't really have a true passion for a lot of things, or things that were, I wanted to do that I felt called me in a way. But this program provides a lot of guidance for that, puts us on a track to become Black educators. And it's just, I've really, really valued that because of how I was lost in the beginning of trying to find what career I wanted to do. But for the students, for them, I think it's very important, especially during summer. You definitely lose a lot of information you do know. And it's great that we are supplying them with the information that they may have lost, and even a different perspective, like Nia said, through a Black lens, showing them how to understand Black struggle and understand Black people in a way that maybe they weren't getting at school because of the issues that we've talked about earlier. So it's been valuable for, I think, everyone involved to experience a program like this.
Dope. So Nia, you are at Howard University, HBCU. And some of that HBCU culture, child, you say the wrong HBCU or you say you gotta go to this one route, they'll cut you, right? So I am sure it has been an amazing experience. Are you happy with your experience at Howard? How has it been?
I'm so happy that I chose Howard. In my senior year of high school, when I was applying, well, my parents are alumni of Howard, and I, in my very like rebellious 18 or 17-year-old mind, I'm like, I don't want to do what my parents did. Like, I want to make my own path. I want to go my own way. So I applied to a bunch of schools, and I did end up applying to Howard because they were like, just go ahead and apply. Like, you never know. And after just like experiences that I had my senior year, I just saw how important it was to be in a Black space, to be in a space where I could feel safe all the time. I didn't have to worry, oh my gosh, is my teacher going to be racist? Are they going to think like that I'm not smart enough because I'm Black? Like are they going to push these untrue like stereotypes onto me about being a Black woman? I don't have to worry about that at all. Like, I can go into the classroom and feel safe, feel like I can like and feel like I can say like speak my mind in my classrooms without having like opposing views, like without having like I don't know other
Oh, I
views
get
being
completely
pushed
what you're
onto me.
trying to
Yes.
say. Yes.
But I'm really happy that I chose Howard because, like, in every single thing that we do, we learn about Black history. So, like, in my math classes and my science classes and my education courses, we're learning about Black leaders in those fields and how we can reform those specific subjects, like how we can reform science, how we can reform math, how we can reform education to make it better for other Black students.
So we're glad that you're having a great experience at HBCUs. Yes, we are trying to get more money and more support for our HBCUs. And Caleb, you will be a senior this coming year. That is super exciting. I think a lot of us like reflect on and think back to senior year, and I'm just like, man, if I could have it back. But you are there. Are you thinking about college? Have you chosen a college yet that you're interested in? You might have a few.
I definitely have a few, especially Howard being in around where I'm living. I definitely want to stay somewhat close to home. So Howard's definitely top of the list right now. Some schools in Pennsylvania, Maryland, and DC. That's around my range right now. I don't really want to go too far away from home. So Howard's definitely up there on the list. And I'll apply in the fall, but I'm going on visits. I'm going on a college visit later this summer. So I'm definitely very excited about the process and very I'm curious to where my future will take me. So it's definitely a very exciting process for me.
Yes. That you like really looking forward to about college?
For college, definitely cementing or finding my path within education. I definitely want to major in either education or Afro American studies or something like that, to try to expand my view and expand what this program has taught me this summer. So that's probably what I'm most excited about, affirming my career path, affirming what I'm doing now. So that's definitely what I'm most looking forward to in college.
Dope stuff. I love it. Nia, you being a college student, you're going into your junior year, right? We would love right now if you could give Caleb some advice about college, about choosing a college, because his time is coming.
Yeah, I would say in choosing a college, definitely make sure you visit the campus. I had my heart set on a different college in Texas, and I visited the campus, and I was like, oh no, never mind. Like, this is not for me. And I ended up visiting Howard just because my dad wanted to go up there, visit some old friends who are still in DC. And I fell in love with the campus. I realized, like, okay, this is where I want to be next year. So definitely, I'm glad that you said you're taking college tours because that can really influence where you're going to go. And then whenever you get there, just try and get super involved on campus. I know at Howard, but at all colleges, there's a ton of orgs and clubs that you can be a part of. And even if you are not sure about it, I would say just go to like the trial meetings, because you might find a community of people that you may have never found before. And I think it's just a great way to expand on your experiences, expand on things you like. Yeah, so definitely just get involved on campus. Make sure you tour where you're going to go, and just don't put too much pressure on yourself your freshman year, because it is a big transition and college classes are a lot harder than high school ones.
Definitely. And I'll say to both of you, as the OHEAD of the group and in this space right now, while doing all of that, while pursuing your dreams and getting focused on your career, like make sure that you are taking time to enjoy yourself and enjoy life, because you don't get this time back. And you would hate to look back on all of this and say, I wish I would have, or I should have, or I could have. So make sure that during all of this, you're still taking time for self-care. You're enjoying the moments. You're enjoying time with friends. You're creating new experiences, and you're creating new memories, because that's all going to be important as well in your development. Like, I love the fact that both of you, though you're super smart, working hard, and really career and future driven, both of you are involved in extracurricular activities. We got my man Caleb out here, who out here singing and being a baseball star. And we got my girl Nia out here on the Senate stuff and writing for papers. Like, all of that is important to create experiences and memories for yourself. So as y'all go through this journey called life, do not forget to enjoy it. And that's just some advice from an old head, child. But I would also love to hear from you guys, right? Because I'm here, right, doing this work, trying to inspire young people like you to get in education. How do we inspire more young people to become educators? Because we need you guys. How can we do that?
For me, what's gotten me into this, and really just seeing the discrepancies in the school system, I feel like a lot of times you'll attract people that want to get into work like this by showing or revealing the statistics, revealing how unfair and how the equity in the school system is non-existent, especially for black and brown students and other minorities as well. So, you know, I drive through a neighborhood, and I live in an area that's predominantly black and not as affluent. And seeing and me being so blessed to go to a good school, I see the discrepancies, you know, every day just coming home. I see how students aren't engaged, how they don't really care about school as much, how their environment is impacting how they learn, and how they eventually go through life. So I think revealing that to people that might not have that same perspective, to people that may be living in their bubble and not realizing how blessed they are, revealing to people like that will definitely attract people that want to help, that will have the kids' best interest when they start teaching. I definitely think that's very important to attract more younger people to work like this, which is so important.
Yes. Changing the mindset, changing the thought process, understanding disparities. All great advice. Nia?
Yeah, I definitely agree that people's mindsets are a big thing that's holding um, a lot of people back from becoming educators. But I think things like this, where we talk about education and the inequality that's within education, and just learning more about it, will also just help people want to become educators, and just having like their mindset change from education. Because some people still, when I tell them I'm an education major, they kind of blow it off. They're like, oh, that's an easy major, when it is not at all. um, I think people need to really change their mindset around that, because learning to be a truly good teacher, it should not be easy. Like, that should not be an easy feat for you to accomplish at all. So I think people need to get out of that mindset that it's an easy career, an easy major, and realize you're changing the lives of like hundreds and hundreds of children who will come through your classroom. So I think when people are ready to look past their previous notions of what education is and realize how unequal it is in education, then they will be able to, then more people will be open to becoming educators.
Yes, and that's funny that you say that people think education is an easy major. That's the so you want a hard life? Like what's going on? But knowing, right, like teaching isn't an easy job. I mean, there's so many things that come with that job that aren't taught in schools of education or in practical teacher training. So, we salute both of you guys for even wanting to be in education. I know we're coming to a close here, but before we do, I would love to hear from both of you. And I think the educators on the call would love to hear this too. What do students need to experience more of in school? So from being students, having this freedom school experience, being exposed to new things yourself this summer, what do you guys feel like students need to have or experience more of while in school?
I think students need to have more meaningful learning in schools. So, of course, all learning that they do is meaningful in a way. I think having um, learning that they can apply to their lives and connect to their lives will make education so much better for them. And like seeing that in the freedom schools, how we connect things to like the outside world, I think that that is one of the biggest things that needs to happen in education is being able to connect with your students, connect with their cultures, connect with things that they like to do outside of school. Just like simple connections, making like pop culture references or like playing music that that they like. It can make them see education as or being educated as something that's like cool and fun instead of like seeing it as like, oh, I don't want to go to school. Then they'll want to be educated because they see that, oh, I can actually use this in my life. Because I think that's a big problem with a lot of students is they're like, oh, I'm never going to use this. I'm never going to use that. But if we can connect those in the classroom experiences to their outside lives, then I think that that is one of the biggest ways we can encourage more students to want to learn.
So, and Caleb, what about you? What should students experience more of in school?
I think hands-on learning is very important for students. A lot of times students get very tired, as even me, definitely get tired of writing papers about topics they don't really care about. I feel like more hands-on experience would be definitely good. I also think that schools should provide a perspective that isn't really given right now. I believe that schools should provide, like, going to a predominantly black, white school, the school needs to make an effort to provide a perspective that is interesting and new and fresh to the students so that they can stay engaged. If they just keep teaching the same somewhat whitewashed system that they're doing now, it's not interesting. It's not new. It's not engaging for the students. But if they would to change that, involve Black history, teach Black history for what it is, teach American history for what it is, it would not only be new and refreshing, but it would also call for more engagement from the students, and students would be more invested in their work and more invested in the assignments that they have to do.
Facts. I want to thank both of you guys for taking the time out today to join me on building the Black Educator Pipeline. I'm so happy you guys were able to come through. I know for the educators watching, this was big. We always want to hear from our voices of the young. And again, a lot of people say, oh, we failed our youth or our future is doomed. It's not. You have people just like Caleb and just like Nia that have already joined the fight for liberation and are prepared to dedicate their lives to that. You see the passion in these young people. You see the fire in their eyes and in their voices. So shout out to both of you guys for being an excellent representation of both of your generations. And y'all know we wish you nothing but luck and the best. And we're going to be here at the center to support you on your way and on your next steps. I don't know, before we close out, if either of you want to say a final word to our people. Nia?
Well, I'll say, if you're young out there, get into education, be inspired. Definitely try to involve yourself with the change that you want to see. And for, people who already may be teachers, think about changing your curriculum or changing how your school does things so that you can inspire younger people to be more engaged and more active in this work that we're doing at the Center for Black Development.
Yes.
And I would say for all the educators that are watching, I think one of the biggest things is just working on being actively anti-racist in your teaching. Take a moment to really look over your curriculum, look over what you're teaching, and see, is it this being actively anti-racist, like not just being like truth telling, but I think just working on actively deconstructing white supremacy in your teaching is vitally important for our students coming up. Yeah, that's.
Well, thank you guys for sharing your perspectives. For all my co-conspirators out there watching, please please share this episode. People need to hear the voices of our future and our future activists so we can get involved and support these young people. So shout out to everybody. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next Thursday here live at 12.